Hey everybody, Charlie here, Rookie Farmer. Behind me I have my Ford 530 baler. It was built in the 60s. We attempted to do our first baling for the season and we had a little failure. So I ended up losing the crop due to the parts failure and now waiting on parts to get in. Anyways, I had a cotter pin fail or come out, whatever, in the feed fork assembly, and it caused lots of havoc. Really busted up the gearbox plates and broke some shafts, so we ended up having to order some parts. Thank goodness for used parts places like Walts Tractor. They really hooked me up with getting the parts to get this back on, because it is baling season this time of year. Buying used equipment is rather expensive and a premium. It's better to buy used equipment in off season in order to get going, and for the price of the parts that I've spent, plus the upgrades, updating this thing was cheaper than buying another one. So I've already done a lot of stuff. I didn't cover that in the video, but if you watch the video, probably in the next segment or video 2, I'm going to be machining all new bushings that go in the feed fork assembly. Most of the bushings were destroyed or broken just simply because of the age, either the age of the bushings or whatever. They broke in half, so it required either replacing them. I happen to have a CNC machine, so a little bit of time on the CAD work and a little bit of time machining it, I was able to produce my own. So anyways, behind me, like I said, is the 530 baler. I've put a little, some of the Rust-Oleum Ford Blue on here, and some of the Tractor Supply Ford Gray. Painted that. I got a few of the other parts. We have the covers and stuff over there. I had to do a repair to this cover. This cover had some rust patches down in this back section here, and previous owner attempted to do some welding to it, and the metal had become really thin, so it was really flimsy down here on the bottom section when it clips into the actual baler. So I added a layer of fiberglass over it and extra layers in the area where the rust was at. It really stiffened this panel back up, so it was all good there. An attempt to go through and do some adjustments to the play in the plunger assembly. It had a missing bolt holding the bearing plate, and I broke one trying to get it out. So I ended up, and then another one got broke, so I ended up having to machine these bolts here. There's another one underneath this cover, or excuse me, there's one back here. It was missing completely back up here at the top, and then this two, so we had a total of 3, and all I did was take some bolts and machine a taper on them. They're a tapered bolt. They don't have a slot, a hex, or anything. They are completely flat and flush. So all I did was just machine those bolts and put them in place. So now I had to do new bolts. Bear in mind, every time I take a bolt out, I put thread lock back on, or not thread lock, but anti-seize back on, to help with future modifications or adjustments. For the most part, everything's in good shape. Very little to no damage inside here, other than the gearbox, which I'll show you. The crank that goes into this position, this crank here, it was bent, and it was causing this plate or panel right here to wobble every time you would rotate it. So I got another crank coming in from Walts Tractor. Said I didn't paint too much down in here. I was only worried about the sides. There was hints of it rubbing, so I think that crank was bent prior to me owning this, and had been running it with this bent crank forever. But now I have another one coming. So anyways, we'll be getting that in. The bushing, or the gearbox, is getting rebuilt. I've separated some of my bad my tines that were kind of worn or bent. I have a 10-pack, and I still have the ones that are still good. So I'm going to replace the ones that were, you know, in bad shape. Said all the covers been painted. I got the covers just laying back on here to clear up some of the clutter. I have put it, whenever that came and broke, it destroyed the chain, main drive chain. It literally snapped the link. It pulled it apart. So I had to replace the chain. That's a 2060 chain, for those of you that need to know. You want to look for it, just look for the 2060. And the other one that goes for the knotter assembly, that is a 2050 chain. You can get that at Tractor Supply, but the 2060 you cannot. You got to order that online somewhere. I got mine on eBay. It was like 20 bucks for 100 links, and it was more than enough. So anyways, we're gonna go in and I'll show you with the gearbox. All right, here we are. This is the gearbox. These are the old plates that were on here. You can see whenever it jammed up, it literally busted the lands off of the face of the gearbox. I think the plates would probably still be serviceable, but if you failed again, it's most likely going to poke that end out. But I was able to locate the plates. The prices was decent, even for brand new ones from Messick's. Even though Messick's didn't have the small plate, they only had the large plate. So I was going to have to fix this one, but we'll touch base on that in a second. But the shafts ended up breaking this nipple off of the shafts and destroying the clip. And the clip actually mangled the surface in here. This is not an important surface, but I ended up putting some paper towel in there and filing it clean to get rid of the sharper edges on there, but it did groove it up on both sides because it shattered both of these off and broke both of the clips. So the chunks were everywhere. I mean, there's lots of, you know, this broke parts of the shaft off. So there was lots of little metal parts in there. So I ended up having to completely clean this out, gut it out. The roller bearings, I'm not fearing those. They feel pretty good. I actually ran these new shafts in there to make sure they didn't feel bumpy or anything like that. So I'm not going to replace those because those are enclosed bearing on one end. So those are much harder to find. So we're going to go with leaving these on here. And these are the new plates. The gears, there was nothing wrong with the gears. Those were in great shape. So I looked at all the teeth to make sure there wasn't any fractures or anything like that, stretched teeth. But thanks for Walts Tractors for hooking me up. When I ordered the shafts, they didn't have these plates listed. And after I'd ordered the shafts, I had received my one plate from Messick's. So I emailed Walts real quick to find out if they had the plates. And the guy messaged me or called me the next day and said, you know, when my father pulled the shafts, he didn't feel like pushing the shafts out of and he sent you the plates with it. I was like, yes. So I ended up getting the plates. So big thumbs up to Walts Tractor for hooking me up with those items. So anyways, these are ready to go. I am waiting on for the heavy duty clips to come in from Messick's. These aren't just your common clips that you can get at your hardware store. Those are real thin. These are a heavy duty clip, and so they're 3/32 thick and for 1 1/8" shaft. So I'm waiting on those, and then I can put the gearbox back together, and then that can go back in the machine, and then we're ready to roll forward. All right, here we are with the parts that's kind of come off. You know, if you're watching this channel, please thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It's a small contribution. It really helps us out. We're trying to grow the channel, and you know, if there's content that you're looking for a 530 baler, or you know, my Mahindra tractor or my Ford 3600 or anything like that, you know, feel free, drop me a message and I'll do what I can to try to make something up for you. But in the interim, all right, so a lot of this is the old stuff that's come off, and then some of it's been refurbished and painted, etc. The chain that came off of it, that's the 2050 chain. I bought a new one from Tractor Supply. I'm going to replace that chain since I've gotten this thing this far apart. That looks like the original chain because it's painted blue. So I'm going to replace that chain. This is the E260. It's in the box, the 2060 chain that has the broken link. That's one I ordered off of eBay. And then these are all the tine retainers. I've sandblasted them in my blast cabinet and repainted them up. I didn't care what color. I just wanted to get something to coat to keep them from rusting again. And then all the bearing back plates. Like I said, stay tuned. Next part we'll have machining new bushings. If you're familiar with the bushings that go on the crank and they go up to the spring assemblies for the feed fork, and then also the feed fork bearings. All these old plastic bearings, I mean, they were so old. I mean, they're totally discolored. They don't even look like, and you can literally scrape plastic away with your finger. They're so old. But these are made of nylon 6, which is a really good bushing material. And so there's no telling how old these are, but I'm going to be remachining all brand new ones. You can buy certain ones at Messick's, but I have the CNC machine, so I'm going to produce these. And I'm replacing a ton of hardware. Some of these, the bolts, they broke, taking them apart. There's a box full in here. I went to on McMaster car. I ordered tons of hardware, bolts and nuts and washers and everything. But later I found out, go to Tractor Supply. I mean, this box full of hardware was $100 and something from McMaster car. And you can go to Tractor Supply and you buy it by the pound. And it tells you the count per pound. And I spent way less buying some other hardware that I didn't need than for that entire order. And I got almost the same amount of nuts and bolts. They're like $3.99 for low grade bolts, a pound. And you can mix and match, so you can just grab a fistful of washers and nuts and a fistful of bolts, throw them all in one bag. They just throw them on the scales and weigh it. Super awesome the way to deal with that. So for the future, and they sell the low grade, grade 5 and grade 8 bolts. So my future is going to be buying hardware from Tractor Supply. That's the best deal that I've found so far. Anyways, this crank is the crank that's over by the knotter assembly. This crank, I believe it was bent prior to me because of the signs inside the baler. I thought it was just from previous damage and they repaired it, but this crank is bent. On this particular side, this side goes into the pillar block bearing, which is that bearing that mounts in the bulkhead on the twine part compartment side. And you might be able to see it in this video, but it's slightly bent. So what happened is when I disconnected the chain in there that times the two knotter or the feed fork assemblies, I took the chain off, and then I rotate, and once I pulled the feed fork assembly off and just left the crank, I could rotate it and watch that panel just wobble severely too. So it was a pretty good bend. So thankful Walts Tractor had another crank, so I got another crank coming in. I mean, I could have straightened this one out to a more tolerable. It uses pillar block bearings, and if you're unfamiliar with pillar block bearings, they're made for misalignments, etc., because it's an oval shaped or a contoured shape bearing, and that bearing rides in these plates, so it's made to swivel basically for alignment. So a little bit's okay, a lot is bad because you're just going to fatigue that metal over time. So anyways, we got a new crank coming. If that one doesn't pan out, I'll most likely straighten this one up for a future, keeping it for parts. But the interim, that's it. So let's break from this and go to step 2, and you'll see the machining process of making these new bushings. Like I said, pretty much every one of them were destroyed. They were already in bad shape anyways, but The holes are oblong. The tolerances were just totally poor. So now it's going to get a fresh new look on life and some new bushings in there, and be ready for the remainder of this hay season, being that I've lost a couple acres of hay this year because of this failure. I'm kind of going through this thing and making sure it's good to go so I don't lose any more, because I still have a few more fields to do. So and I'm praying for some rain, so I need to seed and put some fertilizer out on the field that I just hayed. So anyways, stay tuned, look out for the next video on machining the bushings and basically wrapping up, I believe, or we may go into another level, video 3. But anyways, please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.